Any seasoned TTRPG player knows the common, oh well, any spellcaster in almost any system is just inherently stronger and more powerful than just about any martial class in most situations. Obviously, there are always your exceptions, but on average, that's just how it is. Which, hey, they have magic. That's pretty hard to compete with a sword. However, what if we gave them a resource system of their own? And that's where DC20 came in and introduced stamina points. What's going on, everybody? If you're new here, welcome. I am Blzane. We've been talking about DC20 for a bit now, and we have some more we need to go over because this system is oh so good. And today we're talking about stamina points, which if you didn't see my last video, I highly recommend going to watch it. It gives you a good idea of how spellcasters function. But spellcasters use a thing called mana, and they use their mana points in order to use their magic and or enhance it. Marshals get a very similar thing, and you're going to notice the Dungeon Coach has mentioned this many a time when talking about his system. A lot of his classes and a lot of his stuff, he likes to mirror it. So if he gives the spellcasters and magic users something, he wants to give the martial classes something. So in this case, the stamina points is what kind of replaces the mana point system for spellcasters, but this time for marshals. So now that we have an idea of what stamina points are, what do we use them for? Well, we use them for different things like techniques, maneuvers, class features, stuff of that nature in order to kind of enhance our attacks as martial characters. So again, kind of how a spellcaster can do their basic cantrip, or they can use mana points to make them stronger or do new and cool things. Just how martial classes work, where they can use these stamina points to do new and cool things or enhance their attacks in different ways. And again, there are kind of like broad techniques and things like that that most all martials will have access to, but there are also specific class features that will be dependent on what character you are playing or using. Now with these stamina points, just like how the mana points work, your maximum threshold will increase as you level up. You can also take different talents to help increase it. Talents are basically this system's equivalent to like D&D's feats, so things you can take to kind of customize and make your character stronger as you go. Now the interesting side of stamina points is how you regain them, because you actually regain them, one, at the end of combat. You will go back to your kind of maximum threshold or whatever you started the combat at. You regain what you used. Now, the really cool thing is you can regain stamina mid-combat. And I'm not talking how a wizard could like drink a mana potion or something like that and gain more mana. No, you regain them by doing what you do best. So, for example, something like a barbarian, when you get a heavy, brutal, or critical hit, or you are hit by a heavy, brutal, or critical hit, you're gonna regain some stamina. Pretty sick. So you use your stamina for a really cool swing, and then let's say you happen to get a brutal hit, which if you don't remember, like we talked about in previous videos, that's beating the AC of a monster or creature or whatever by 5 or more, then you're gonna regain some of that stamina back, which is awesome, right? It's kind of the idea of like you get in that flow state, right? The motion of, as your character does what they do best, they're obviously going to hit that like moment of like, oh, okay, I can continue this kind of combo, so to speak. Some other examples, the fighter class might regain some SP by performing maneuvers because they're a little fancier with the sword. Another example is the rogue will regain SP by hitting creatures that are affected by conditions, right? So kind of neat. As you spend these stamina points, you regain them mid-combat. Now, the reason being is logistically, right, these stamina points are pseudo weaker than mana points in terms of what you can do with them. But even though they are weaker, you're going to be gaining them a lot faster and a lot more often than something like a spellcaster would. Now, the last couple things that are pretty straightforward that I want to talk about before we get into kind of these specific use cases are going to be things like action points to stamina. So on your turn, you can simply burn 2 of your 4 action points to gain a stamina point. Super simple, super clean. It's nice, can kind of keep you going if you're not like, you don't have a super easy way to regain that stamina point. And then you can also spend 1 or more mana to regain a stamina point for each mana point spent. However, you cannot go the other direction with that. That is important because, again, there are talents that can allow martials to have, you know, very light spells, or vice versa, spellcasters to have some light martial stuff. There's also some classes that are hybrid. So there is a Spellblade class, and the Spellblade obviously has both stamina and mana, so there is that kind of transition if you're needing to transfer some mana into your stamina. And then lastly, when using stamina points outside of combat. Now in my last video, I did misspeak. It goes down to a minimum of 1 mana when you are spending it outside. So Like we talked about with mana, it's -1 on the cost when you're spending mana points outside, but it's still a minimum of 1. And the main reason for that is certain buff spells could be really abused by just spamming them on yourself pre-combat if they were free. But for stamina, drumroll please, it is completely free. You do not spend stamina points in order to enhance these things you do outside of combat. Now there's a few reasons for that, and you might be thinking, oh my gosh, this is the most busted thing I've ever seen in my life. 1, you are still limited to your maximum amount of stamina that you can spend in like a single turn of DC20. So just like the mana, there's a max amount you can spend to enhance spells that increases as you get stronger. Same with stamina. There's a max amount of stamina that you can dump into a single thing. That limit is still there. 2, the reason you can do this infinitely is stamina point enhancements are always physical enhancing things, right? So if you have some kind of technique available to make you jump farther, well, it's a little silly to have to burn your stamina point to jump further when you're not in the heat of combat, because that's kind of the idea, right? Whenever you're actually fighting for your life, you're going to be using energy a lot more rapidly because of you know, a lot of outside circumstances, where if you're just trying to clear a chasm and there's no immediate threat, well, you have more time to prep, run up, and, you know, using a stamina point just feels a little silly. So stamina points are completely free to use outside of combat, again, up to that maximum amount. So we'll go ahead and talk about over here the Heroic Bash, which is our first example of what you can use stamina points to do. So as you can see, if you want to read through it, you can basically use an action point and a stamina point. It doesn't like cost an additional action point, not for this one at least, just the one stamina point on top of it. And as you can see, you make an attack check against the PD, which is physical defense, which is kind of like their AC basically, of a target within a space of you, and it makes a physical save against your save DC. So you do both things. You make the attack check and they have to make the save, which is important. And it's not like dependent, like your attack has to hit for them to make the save. Both things happen. And that's important. I'm going to go ahead and clarify that of if one succeeds and one fails, it doesn't matter. They get the negatives of what happened. So if you miss the attack, but they fail the save, okay, they're still going to take those negative effects of that save, even if your attack missed. Vice versa, you know, if you hit the attack and they fail the save, or they succeed the save, I guess, then they don't have to take those bad effects, but they're going to take the damage from the attack. So it's kind of nice because it gives you two opportunities where you don't feel like your turn completely got sent to the wayside because you missed the attack, so you don't even get the save part of it. Kind of helps with some feel bad moments. But the attack hit, the target takes your weapon's damage, pretty simple. The save failure, they are pushed horizontally up to 3 spaces, plus 1 additional space for every 5 fails it saves by. So again, following that by 5 rule, whatever the save is, if they fail it drastically, you could be pushing them possibly 6 spaces away, which is pretty crazy. It kind of talks about here where it can be, you can choose to knock them vertically into the air if you want, you can choose to knock them prone if you want. Some cool options and some cool like variation. Now, as you see at the bottom, there are also technique enhancements. So just like spells, you can enhance these techniques by spending more stamina points. So just to use one as an example, you can spend 1 SP to increase the damage by 2. It's very simple, but so effective and so nice. Or extended knockback, right? You can spend a stamina point to increase the distance that they're pushed by 2 and increases the damage on top of it. So let's say you're trying to push them over a cliff and you know you might need that extra damage. You can slap extended knockback on that, and it's so simple. Now, the last example I want to give here is actually a reaction technique. So yes, these exist as well, which is something called Tumble and Dive, which it will always tell you the trigger if it is a reaction-based thing. So in this case, if you were the target of an attack, you can then take this reaction, which this one costs 2 action points and a stamina point. You can move up to your speed and avoid the attack entirely as long as you end your movement outside of the range or behind full cover of the attack. This movement provokes opportunity attacks as normal. So kind of sweet. You get to like have that kind of dream and idea of tumbling and diving out of the way, but it's going to cost you part of your turn, which makes sense. I mean, you're doing a lot of things here. Now, not only that, these reactions have enhancements. So for 2 more stamina points, making it a 3 stamina point investment, so pretty hefty investment here, you can bring a willing creature within a space of you as a part of this, and they move the same space as you and also must end their movement within 1 space as you. So sick. That's so cool. So you now have this reaction that you can use to kind of tumble and dive out of the way, right? You see a fireball flying at you and you get to dodge to the side. Now, if you really want to jack up the usage of your stamina points, awesome. You can grab your friend right next to you and basically tumble alongside with you, just dragging them along. It's so cool. You just saved you and possibly your teammate from a fireball or whatever it is that's coming at you. Okay, I could sit here and rant about this forever, but the system is so good. And so that's about it. That's a basic idea of how stamina points work and what they're used for. Now, just so you know, there are other techniques. There's things for ranged weapons, things for shields, right? A bunch of different ideas. There's even like certain taunts and things like that that you can do. So bunch of really cool stuff you can do with stamina points, and it's awesome because all it does is it brings those martial classes to be on par with spellcasters. So they also have their cool, unique thing they get to do and alter their attacks, because the mana point system was such a big bump. Obviously, he couldn't go without giving something to the martial classes. So I hope y'all enjoyed this quick rundown. On the next episode, we're actually going to do a dive into how damage works in this system, because it's quite different if you're used to something like D&D with damage dice. And if you noticed a lot of things were giving like +2 damage, which if you're used to D&D might not sound like a ton. In this system, something like that's a lot, but we'll get into that next time. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you like the content and you like the coverage of DC20, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you all on the next one. Peace out.